I wrote this a long time ago. This is the job to be done I wrote for iPod, okay, when iPod was new. And it's just really vastly different than anything that was competing in this space at the time. Now, iPod today seems like ancient history, but the job is kind of helpful. Because what you're doing, when you look out at the audience of music lovers, there are a lot of people who are music lovers. So is that enough? No. It's music lovers who want their music to be mobile. Okay, so the current system didn't really, even these cassette recorders weren't helping with mobile people. There were some early MP3 players, but using them was a nightmare, right? Getting music up and down from those recorders was a nightmare, so it had to be simple, right? So you've got a music lover who wants mobile music and wants it to be simple, okay? And the fourth ingredient is cool. Right? One of the things that caught everybody off guard was the importance of cool. And so the importance of design in iPod. And so what I just took you through is, functionally, the more music it carried, the better, because it had the music collection. It could fit a mood. The second thing was it needed to be mobile. It needed to address their moods. This is the personal level, so we've moved from functions to the personal level. At the personal level, it needed to be simple because the last thing they're going to do is struggle with it. Okay, the minute you struggle with it, you put it back in geek land, and then you're in a whole different set of products because you're in geek land. Okay, and the third thing is cool. And why is cool important? Because cool is the way I project myself socially. Right, so if you're dealing with hip people, you're projecting yourself socially. So the interesting thing that Steve Jobs did when he launched the first iPod is he came out with a white unit. Immediately after he came out with a white unit, you may not remember, but he came out with a U2 unit. And so fundamentally, U2 was the it band when iPod was launched, and he got, to your point, he got Bono to sell it for him. Okay? Bono said, this is hip. This is the way you do it. And it worked great. It worked great. Now, iTunes itself is not a simple, is not an inconsequential piece of this whole thing. But iTunes fundamentally destroyed the current record industry, right? The current album industry. And this is what I'm telling you about business models that protect what you're doing and challenge the norm. People really didn't want to buy 12 songs at a time. For a long time, they really hadn't wanted that. They had wanted to take albums apart and just buy the songs that they liked. And so Steve Jobs was fundamentally saying, I'm going to give you a way to do that. And that's what iTunes was. And he made it dead nut simple. So the iPod fundamentally, which is now iTunes, which is now in every iPhone, which is, right, it's universal. It sort of is a great example of the three levels that we're talking about and the simplification that goes on with a really good job to be done. You fundamentally get a whole stereo system that is mobile for $199. Who doesn't want that? Right? Think about that point in time. Who doesn't want a whole stereo system for $199? Now, on the good enough principle, if you think about at the time, the performance vector, or imagine it if you weren't there, what do you think they were all working on trying to do with music at that point in time from a performance point of view? Say that really loud. Say it really loud. Right. Okay? So what they did at the time, I have 10 minutes? Oh, okay. Oh, I see what you were doing. Okay. So, sound better, right? So, truth be told, the iPod didn't sound good, right? And so Jobs, as a billionaire, or at that point, 100 millionaire, had all the resources he needed to spend, all the money he needed to spend to make iPod sound great, and he knew he didn't have to do that. He knew all it had to do was sound good enough through the earbuds, right? He knew the touch wheel was important, he knew the quantity of music on it was important, and he knew getting it on and getting it off was important. And he's literally that much of a simplifier. So I would say to you, even those of you who are doing medical sorts of projects, it's that kind of thinking, that kind of sort of rabid dedication to simplification is what differentiates what you're trying to do from the crowd. It's really understanding the good enough principles, and I think your investors will respect that, because I think they see a lot of other sorts of projects that bring so many variables into the startup equation at once that they actually amplify risk. Okay, so to get the iPod off the ground, if he had spent years and years perfecting this thing, somebody would have gotten there first, it would have been insanely expensive, and the risk of success would have been very, very high. So that's kind of what happens behind the scene on it. And the answer is yes, he thinks that deeply about it. Right? The successful ones do. The guys who are starting Uber, the guys who are starting eBay, the guys who are starting Etsy, Pinterest, the whole thing, they're thinking about it. When you meet them, and I've met a lot of them, they really do think about it this deeply. They really get off on thinking about it this way. So it helps. That's again why I'm letting you off the hook. I'm saying you don't have to be the target consumer. You have to do so many other things, right? You don't have to be the target consumer, but your chances of success increase dramatically if you're thinking about it at that level of richness. So what we did is we went through.
Mark, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Can I ask a question? So, with the announcement of the HomePod that's come out just in the last couple of days.
Oh yeah.
So,
it's a speaker.
Interesting, right? I mean, because like you said with the iPod, they were not the first MP3 player. So this is not the first product like it in the marketplace. What's your initial opinion on it? Because the price point, the feature set, and whatnot, and how do you think that's going to compete in the marketplace?
I've lost my North Star. Like when Steve passed, it's a little bit harder for me to read Apple than it used to be. I think people don't know how to think about it yet. And I think the thing that Apple's done on the HomePod that's different than what they've done before, Apple was super slick in the past. What they would actually do is announce it to their bloggers and their critics 6 to 12 months before the launch date and let the internet go batshit, right? If you remember all the other iPhone launches and all that other stuff, you would know about the next iPhone 6 to 12. Do you know why they did that? Why do you think they did that? Feedback. Great marketing, feedback. Why? Because they were still developing the feature set. Right? They're that good, they're still developing. It's what you guys have to do too, right? It's the same thing. It's trying to figure out what good enough's going to be for this new iteration, right? What's good enough, what's not good enough, what's important, what's not, what's too complicated, what's simple, how do you communicate about it? Did you have a question?
I think it's interesting because I read the announcements about it, and it's not going to be here until December, number one.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Number two, their focus is on the quality of music. I mean, that's really how they're positioning it to the market. And the reality is, all these voice digital assistants, our whole world is moving toward that, and it's not about the music necessarily as much as it is about how we interact with computers. So I don't get it. I think that, like you say, I think Apple's kind of straying from some of Steve's or loss of leadership.
Yeah. I mean, it is early, but with the pipeline, the size company they are today and the pipeline, you know, you really got to go into production for Christmas pretty quick here. Yeah.
So the whole idea then is you just have to get the idea correct, and you just have to do that good enough.
Right.
That's it.
No,
Well, and then you incrementally get towards excellence as you move ahead.
Yeah, so you have to understand that if this is our product, this is an idea. It's not a thing, right? So get the thing out of your mind, right? This is an idea, and it's an idea on 3 levels.
Your solution.
Yeah,
You get to the solution.
this is your solution, right? And this has 2 dimensions. One's excellent, the other one's good enough, right? The odds of this needing to be beautiful from a design point of view are extremely low, right? It's just not a public tool. What it needs to do is connect up with that thing dependably 1,000% of the time. And it needs, in my hand, it needs to be simple and intuitive how to work it so I don't have to spend time thinking about it. But the odds of it having to be beautiful are relatively low. And the odds of it needing to have 200-yard range are relatively low, right? So think about what kind of effect those 2 things have on the cost of the thing you're making. You see what I'm saying? It's unpacking all that. Yes, you could put 200-yard range, but the odds of a speaker being 200 yards away from the presentation are pretty low.